What are the dark side of the MBTI personality types? Starting with what I think Ruby Frankie's type is right here, an ESTJ. Just want to start off by saying I don't know her, I don't know her family, I don't know any of them personally, so I'm only talking from what I've seen on cameras and my experience with MBTI and what I'm perceiving that she is. This is my perspective. I don't know actually what she is. She hasn't ever, taken an MBTI test with me, so I can't say for sure what her personality type is. That being said, I think she is an ESTJ, and an unhealthy ESTJ at that. Whether there's another clinical diagnosis that she could be diagnosed with as well, that is very possible, but not for me to say. I won't comment on that because I don't know. But I just want to talk about unhealthy ESTJs in general and see if it kind of matches up with what's happening with her. So ESTJs are extrovert, sensing, thinking, and judging preferences. Their dominant cognitive function is TE, extroverted thinking. That is the need to control things around them, be in charge of things around them in terms of resources, people, ideas. They kind of like to organize and order everything, be the one that's leading the ship kind of thing. This is their dominant cognitive function, a function that they tend to be very good at. And then this is followed by or complemented with their auxiliary function, SI, so introverted sensing. That is the function that is responsible for kind of recalling memories, remembering things from the past in detail, being very detail-oriented, detail-focused, very much in the present moment, so not really thinking ahead into the future, like possibly future consequences, and more thinking about the past, considering and learning from their past experiences, learning from tradition, very valuing tradition, and putting a lot of emphasis on traditional values. They can be perceived as a little bit rigid and not being open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, because they kind of feel that whatever was working before works now, status quo, let's keep it going, no need to implement or make changes to things unless they see like a logical, real need to, but they tend to be more resistant to change as a personality type in general. They then have NE as their tertiary function. This is the function that will become a little bit more prominent and more developed in their 30s, mid-30s, so this is the function that's responsible for back and forth brainstorming ideas with others, kind of more looking at the big picture rather than just the present moment, thinking a little bit more ahead into the future, and kind of just playing around with possibilities, seeing different hypothetical scenarios, and they're very happy to talk about that with others. They really enjoy that sharing of ideas and possibilities with their people. So this could coincide with the fact that now she has hit that kind of age where she would be developing this function. However, it could be developing maladaptively. Just because you're developing this function does not mean that you're developing it in a good, healthy way. So obviously in this case, I don't think it developed in a good, healthy way. And these new ideas and these new possibilities and the people that she chose to bounce these ideas off with were bad, to say the least. I mean, obviously this is very serious. So I'm trying not to go into too much detail on what the background of this case is. I'm just talking about the personality that I think she's in general and how they can manifest in unhealthy ways. The least developed function for an ESTJ, even a healthy ESTJ, is FI. That is that kind of moral compass, that sense of right and wrong and internal values for that person. So what's right for one person may not be right for somebody else, obviously, but those moral values for someone with FI, if it's the lowest on the cognitive stack, then these values, they find it hard to determine what their values might be. FI tends to be described as one's conscious, and usually people with high FI make their decisions based on their values, that they need to live in congruence with these values. Now, people who have low FI do not need to live in congruence with these values. In her case, she needs to live in congruence with what makes logical sense to her, and or ESTJs, what makes logical sense, and not so much about what are the consequences, not so much what are the circumstances of the people involved. It's more about what's objectively logical. Now, again, this is a good example of how stereotypes can play a role here, that just because you're a logical thinker does not mean that you're coming to logical conclusions or right conclusions for yourself or others. So some people may think that, oh, because you're a thinker personality, it means that you have a very clear head and you can think objectively, and then therefore your judgment will not be clouded. That is not the case. Sometimes it is vital to consider other people around you. Sometimes it's vital to consider what other people's consequences are, and you really shouldn't make a decision based solely on what you think is logical, because your version of logic might be twisted. So yeah, FI is very much about personal values and living in congruence with those values, not compromising those values. Those with high FI also don't want to impose their values on other people. They just want to have the peace and harmony to be able to live their values the way they want, and other people can live the way they want. Now, people with low FI tends to be the opposite. So a healthy ESTJ is often practical, organized, efficient, with a very strong sense of duty. I just have a few notes here, so I'm just looking at this a little bit. However, like any personality type, ESTJs do have dark sides, blind spots. And if their environment and the conditions of their environment bring about these blind spots, or even, I won't even say blind spots, these unhealthy behaviors, this is what it can manifest to. So number one, they can become overly controlling. So an unhealthy ESTJ may be excessively controlling, and they may try and impose their way of doing things onto others. They lack flexibility, and they may be intolerant to other people's methods or perspectives. I think this resonates really well here. Number two, they can have a tendency to be insensitive. So they may be overly focused on logic and efficiency, and may not consider, like, okay, this may be the logical way, but is it the right way? Is it right? Are other people okay with this? How do they feel about this? They tend to disregard people's feelings or emotions and the emotional needs of others, and this can make them come across as harsh, blunt, or insensitive. Now, in this case, yikes, that is scary. Number three, they can be inflexible. So ESTJs, they tend to value structure, rules, and consistency. So they kind of feel jarred if things don't go according to their plan. When this is when this turns unhealthy, the inflexibility turns into complete resistance to change. They struggle to adapt to new situations. They become really, really rigid in their routines and their expectations. So yeah, that resonates, I think. Number four, impatient. So an unhealthy ESTJ will become excessively task-oriented. They will become impatient with anyone or anything that they perceive to be standing in their way, and in the way of achieving their goals in particular. And this can lead to hasty decision-making and dismissive behavior, to say the least. I think we're on number five. Number five, they have workaholic tendencies, but unhealthy ESTJs will often take this hardworking and committed duty kind of attitude to another level. They'll be extreme in neglecting their personal life and their own personal health sometimes, and the relationships in favor of work. In this case, we know what she was neglecting. Point number six, they become overly critical. So they have a tendency to find fault with others and can be overly critical or overly judgmental. And this can really have a negative atmosphere in the environment. They can create that negative atmosphere in the environment that they're in, whether it's their personal relationships or professional relationships. And lastly, number seven, they have difficulty with emotions. So unhealthy ESTJs may find it difficult to deal with their own emotions or the emotions of others. They kind of are at a loss to what to do. They may suppress their feelings. They may struggle to understand and empathize with the feelings of others. That makes a lot of sense here. Now, obviously, I'm talking about unhealthy ESTJs. I mean, a lot of healthy ESTJs can struggle with these things as well, but unhealthy ESTJs will take these things to a whole other level of maladaptive behaviors, as we know with this case. These behaviors are not exclusive to ESTJs, obviously, as well. Not every ESTJ will go through this kind of, rite of passage or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But definitely recognizing these behaviors can be a step in making changes before anything too bad happens. And it can help, with your personal growth, with managing conflict, and just better coping mechanisms with stresses in your life or whatever you might be going through. So if you know someone who's going through these kind of behaviors or these kind of patterns or changes in their behavior, consider reaching out to them or to a professional medical health, mental health professional who can help with this. Again, I don't want to talk about this case. I'm just talking about this personality type in a more broad sense, and how an unhealthy version of this personality type can manifest and how scary it can be. And going along with that, all personality types can develop maladaptively, can develop into very scary people if left unchecked.